So what is going on, guys? I'm Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video where today I want to talk about things you don't know about Call of Duty Zombies. In this episode I want to focus on Mob of the Dead. This is going to be a super interesting video, so make sure you are staying tuned up until the end. I guarantee you do not want to miss any of this information. Before I get into it, I do want to say, years and years ago, I remember watching a YouTuber by the name of Raheem. I think he might have changed his channel name, I'm not too sure what it was called back then, but he did a few videos on some interesting theories for different maps. A lot of what I want to talk about in this video is based off some of the things that he showed then. But now, since the zombie storyline is over, we know a lot more. Hopefully we can connect some dots. A lot of our zombies maps, or at least back in the day especially, were based off real life events and things. There was a ton of Nazi conspiracies back in World at War, and then a few of our zombies maps have been based off real life locations, such as this map, Mob of the Dead, being Alcatraz, or Der Eisendrache being Hoffenwürfen Castle in Austria. And with that, in these maps, Treyarch like to include things in-game which are based on real-life stories. Some are true, some are just conspiracies, but nevertheless they are very interesting. I can guarantee you guys are going to enjoy this video, so let's get into it. Now, as I said, Mob of the Dead takes place in Alcatraz Prison, San Francisco, a real-life location, and although the characters that we meet aren't real, Billy, Sal, Finn, the Weasel, Brutus, Stanley Ferguson, it's possible that they were based around real stories. For example, Brutus. If you search up his name, the first thing you are going to come across is Marcus Junius Brutus. He was a part of the assassination of Julius Caesar. We know that Treyarch like to include a lot of mythology in our maps, Greek, Roman, Egyptian as of late. After being defeated by Anthony at the Battle of Philippi, Greece in October 42 BC, Brutus actually ended up killing himself. He committed suicide. Very similar to the death of Brutus in-game, he also committed suicide by electric chair. But Marcus Junius Brutus was known as a national leader, a statesman, a man who was respected. That's exactly the same as Brutus in Mob of the Dead. They were both leaders, they were both respected around the prison. The first warden of Alcatraz was James A. Johnston. I believe there was around 4 in total, but Brutus, in-game, was the first warden of Alcatraz, so if Treyarch were basing him off any of them, it would have been James. Reading a little bit about his biography, it says, orphaned at the age of 10, he began working at the age of 15 at Weinstock, Lubin & Co. He later started Johnston's Memoir at 916 Market Street in San Francisco, where he was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1907 and was appointed chair of California State Board of Control in 1911. He served as wardens of both Folsom and San Quentin State Prison. It was Johnston who was instrumental in the development of Alcatraz as a prison and was involved in its design as a federal prison in 1934. He served as the first warden of Alcatraz from 1934 up until 1948. He was considered to be a highly strict disciplinarian and a devout reformist who imposed a number of rules upon the prison, including a strict code of silence, which led to him being nicknamed the Golden Rule Warden from his San Quentin days. He was relatively popular among inmates and guards, known as Old Saltwater to the inmates, and is credited with challenging the barbaric tactics used in the prison when he was there, including straitjackets and solitary confinement in darkness. In 1937, he was assaulted by Burton Phillips from behind in a dining hall, who beat him in anger at a workers' strike, but he continued to attend meals unguarded. 10 of the 14 escape attempts took place during his tenure, including the one that resulted in the Battle of Alcatraz. Johnston wrote several books about his experiences, including Prison Life is Difficult, where he documents his time spent as a warden. He was married and had a son and 3 daughters. So there is some information there in James's bio that relates to Brutus. First off, the fact that James was instrumental in the development of Alcatraz as a prison. He was involved in its design in the 1930s. If you listen to one of the radios from the warden that you can find in Blood of the Dead, he mentions him sitting in a sanctuary, brandy in hand, overlooking his prize, the prison. He talks about the Department of Justice and how they should thank him for opening the prison a year early.
Today is a red letter occasion. I sit in my sanctuary, brandy in hand, overlooking my prize. My prison. Mine. A temple of concrete and corrupted flesh, tilting on the axis of hell itself. Oh, it is beautiful. I can't recall the last time I indulged in spirits. They appear to have gone to my head.
Congratulations and good luck.
So thoughtful of the DOJ to send me a bottle after all their posturing and blathering and delays. But now the island is open, a full year early, thanks to me and its true purpose. Our purpose, written in the apocryphal pages of history, pulled from the flames of ignorance. Glass. The first drop of blood. Of course, it should be my own. Not too much now. Not yet. Early to bed tonight. Tomorrow, I will be reborn.
James's bio also talks about him being a highly strict disciplinarian, imposing rules upon the prisoners including a strict code of silence, which led to him being nicknamed the Golden Rule Warden. Again, that very much sounds like Brutus. If you are confused, Brutus is the Warden, they're the same person. And another thing that's mentioned about James is he had a wife, a son, and 3 daughters. And there is a quote from Brutus in Mob of the Dead when you kill him, in which he says, "I had a wife and a son."
I had a life, a wife and son.
But it's pretty clear that, more than likely, they got the inspiration of Brutus from the actual first warden of Alcatraz. One thing that is interesting is Alcatraz in real life didn't actually open as a federal prison until 1934, whereas Mob of the Dead takes place in 1933, which does explain in this instance for the game why the warden says it's opened a whole year earlier thanks to him. So it looks like there could be some more modern inspiration taken from Brutus based off James. Well, I wouldn't really say modern though, it was back in the 1930s. But then also some Greek and Roman history thrown in there too. But that isn't the only thing we see to do with ancient Greece in the map. You may have heard the name Icarus, that is the name of the plane that you find on the rooftop, but it's also the name of one of the Weasel's comic strips named Icarus from Mars. Back in Black Ops 2, on the main menu, I'm not too sure exactly what date this was put up by Treyarch, but for a short amount of time, I'm guessing around the release date of Mob, you could see a page out of Al's journal. It says, "I've completed the aircraft schematics, using only components that I know can be found within the grounds. However, everything hinges on gaining the trust and help of some of the facility's most notorious residents. They may make fun of me sometimes, but they know I can do anything if I set my mind to it. I've planned enough jobs for them in the past to know that I can convince them to join me as Icarus takes flight." Speaking of Icarus, same old story. The editor defaced my art, scrolling nasty little comments on every page. When I get out, I'll show him how wrong he is. So this was a page taken out of Al's journal that he wrote whilst locked up in Alcatraz. He mentions building the plane on the rooftop that he's named Icarus, but he also talks about his comic strip, and in the map you can find torn up pieces of paper that when you put them together you can make out Al's comic strip. We can see his drawing of the superheroes, however all around them are the editor's notes that he speaks about. If we read some of the notes, he's put bad hair for the woman, where are her shoes, lazy and unfinished work. The editor is not only saying that Al's comic is bad, but he's defaced it. Even some of the comments speaking about the hair or the eye colour is just very picky. This is understandable though, because Al submitted this artwork in 1931. During that time, superheroes weren't a thing. They weren't acceptable, they were seen as weird. The very first superheroes only really came around at the end of the 1930s. If you just search it up you get a few different answers, but apparently the very first superhero was the Phantom, who debuted in 1936. Some say it was Superman, who we first saw in 1938, but all of these superheroes didn't come around until the late 1930s. Al submitted this in 1931, and unfortunately for him, during that time, this just wasn't normal. People with powers was seen as ridiculous, I guess. Hence why some of the comments that we see on Al's comics, such as the woman not wearing shoes, the man flying, nowadays you would look at this and think that's a totally normal thing, that's a normal superhero, but at that time it wasn't. But what you may not know is Al's comic is actually based off one in real life. It was released in 1939, it's called Shock Gibson. You can see the characters look pretty similar, but he was created by an artist named Maurice Scott, who drew it, and an unknown writer. No one knows who actually wrote this comic. If Al's comic, Icarus from Mars, is based off this one, could that have been what Treyarch were going for? No one knows who actually wrote Shot Gibson. Could they have been hinting that it was the Weasel? Possibly, but what's more interesting is if you indulge into Shot Gibson, there are some very clear links to not only Mob of the Dead, but zombies as a whole. In the debut story, The Human Dynamo, scientist Robert Charles Gibson, which is his regular name, Shot Gibson is his superhero name, but he perfects a chemical formula that allows people to directly store, generate and control electricity and test this formula on himself. The formula increases his strength, gives him the power to fire bolts of lightning, and grants him the power of flight. So there's already one link there with him being able to fire bolts of electricity. When you're in the afterlife or purgatory, we use this power in Mob to activate things. But also one of the villains that Shot Gibson fights is someone called Baron von Kampf, and he is known as a mad scientist and zombie maker. He not only created zombies, but gave them radio control. They obey his every word and thought. So Shot Gibson battles against Baron's zombie army. I don't think I need to go into any more detail about that for you guys. You know that we've had a few controllers in our zombie storyline. Samantha has been able to control the zombies. Richtofen has also been able to control the zombies. But as I was saying earlier, that's not the only mention of Icarus in Mob. Besides from the comic, the plane on the rooftop is called that as well. Now if you look up the meaning for Icarus, as part of Greek mythology, this was the son of the master craftsman Daedalus. I've probably pronounced that totally incorrectly, but Daedalus or Daedalus was the creator of the Labyrinth. Icarus and his father attempted to escape Crete, which is a Greek island, by means of wings that his father constructed from feathers and wax. Icarus's father warns him of complacency and then hubris, asking that he fly neither too low nor too high, so the sea's dampness would not clog his wings nor the sun's heat melt them. Icarus ignored his father's instructions not to fly too close to the sun, and when the wax in his wings melts, he tumbled out of the sky and fell into the sea where he drowned, speaking the idiom, "Don't fly too close to the sun." As part of this story, the Labyrinth could represent Alcatraz. The Labyrinth was built by Daedalus to imprison the Minotaur, until he was eventually imprisoned there himself with his son Icarus, and the only way the two of them could escape was by constructing wings made out of feathers and wax. However, if they flowed too close to the sun, the wax would melt, and if they flowed too close to the sea, the wings would get damp and bring him into the ocean. Icarus ends up not listening to his father, he flies too high, the wax on his wings melt, and he tumbles down into the sea where he dies. So if you make the connections, the Labyrinth, the prison, is Alcatraz, and Icarus is the plane. Its wings are made out of wood and cloth, which also, funnily enough, like Icarus from the Greek story, the plane ends up crashing as well. It hits the Golden Gate Bridge and then goes straight into the ocean. Moving on though, when Mob of the Dead initially released, in one of the very first trailers that we had for this map that included Jason Blundell, partway through this trailer there is an image that appears on screen. Now the only way you're going to see this is if you slow it right down, or if you put the trailer into editing software and go through it frame by frame. Clearly Treyarch didn't want us to find this, or at least not easily, but the image that appears in this trailer for less than a second is this. It is one of the cells in Alcatraz, and since this was found, we've discovered that this is cell 14D, just one of the cells in the prison that was used for solitary confinement. But this one has a very interesting background. If you search cell 14 on the internet, you're going to find loads of different articles, but just reading one of them it says, cell 14D is what is known as a whole cell. Unruly prisoners were kept in a whole cell for up to 19 days at a time in complete isolation. A pretty miserable existence. Still, whole cells were one up from strip cells, where inmates had to survive in the dark with no clothing and little food rations. Cell 14D is believed by some to be very active with the spirits. Visitors and employees have reported feeling a raw coldness and have claimed that at times a sudden intensity encompasses the cell. Tales have been told of an event in the 1940s when a prisoner locked up in 14D screamed throughout the night that a creature with glowing eyes was killing him. The next day, guards found the man strangled to death in the cell. No one ever claimed responsibility for the convict's death. However, the next day when doing head counts, the guards counted one too many prisoners. Some of the guards claimed to see the dead convict in line with other inmates, but only for a second before he vanished. So why would Treyarch randomly throw this image of cell 14D into the Mob of the Dead trailer? I don't believe you can actually find specifically which one cell 14D is going to be in game, but the rumour is when one of the inmates was thrown in here, he was screaming all night that someone with glowing eyes was trying to kill him, and then the next day when the guards went in, he was found dead. He had actually been strangled to death, but there was nothing in his cell with him for him to kill himself with. Strangling yourself to death with your hands is pretty much impossible. So who killed this guy? Was it the thing that he claimed? Someone with glowing eyes? The things with glowing eyes in our storyline are the zombies. And that isn't the only story of paranormal activity in Alcatraz. There's also been stories that have come out from not only prisoners but guards as well, of them hearing whispering, slamming doors, moaning, unexplained footsteps, screams, a woman crying, strange music, floating lights, clanking chains, ghost figures, and glowing red eyes in a pitch black cell in the notorious D block. In Mob of the Dead, we have purgatory, the afterlife, pretty much ghosts essentially, and also red glowing eyes which come from the zombies. Mob of the Dead was the first map to do this. Before this, these zombie eyes were yellow, but in Mob, they were red. This was the first time we saw the zombies with red eyes. But we had seen something else with red eyes before, and that was Samantha's teddy bear. In her bedroom that you can find when you teleport in Kino, in the evil destroyed version of her room, you see her teddy bear, and its eye is glowing red. This was actually the first time we ever saw this. And then we go back to the Mob of the Dead trailer, where we had this image of cell 14D, and we can see in the room is a teddy bear on the floor. We believe that the teddy bear is a representation of Samantha. Every time we see Sam, she is with her teddy when the MPD opened on Moon. We also see the teddy bear inside of the mystery box in random locations. As part of the Doris Easter egg, we have to play hide and seek with the teddy. So it's almost like it's a representation of her. In some cases, the teddy even seems to be alive. It is its own entity, but it's everywhere you go in zombies. There isn't a map without it. And now in the Mob of the Dead trailer, we are seeing it sitting down in cell 14D, a location where someone was killed by an unknown entity, something with red glowing eyes. We have Samantha's teddy bear in Kino der Toten, where its eyes are glowing up red. Were Treyarch suggesting that Teddy had something to do with it? Maybe, but it is very random how it's just sitting on the floor inside of the cell. And we have been told about the eye colour of the zombies that sometimes it means something and sometimes it doesn't. The yellow-eyed zombies are for Samantha, that was the colour when she was in control of them. The blue-eyed zombies are for Richtofen, that was the colour when he was in control of them. We've also seen the colour white in Alpha Omega. We believe that Avogadro could have had something to do with that. But red has been a big mystery. There were red-eyed zombies in Revelations, their eyes were red in Gorod Karovi and this map, Mob of the Dead, but this eye colour has been the biggest mystery out of them all. Is someone in control of them, or is it no one? Even more so, is it Teddy? We have the prisoners and guards of Alcatraz talking about them seeing ghosts. In Mob and Blood, our characters go into the afterlife. In Blood of the Dead as part of the Easter egg, towards the end we actually get to see Billy, Finn and Sal as ghosts where they kidnap Brutus. As part of the Blood of the Dead Easter egg, we destroy the darkness and free all of the souls trapped on the island. The ghosts of the prisoners and guards are released. And then the name of the map itself, Mob of the Dead. The mob being Finn, Billy, the Weasel and Sal of the Dead. They were killed by electric chair. These are the mobsters of the dead. They were trapped in an infinite cycle, a never-ending time loop, cursed to replay the same events over and over again. Every time they attempted to escape Alcatraz on Icarus, they would crash into the Golden Gate Bridge, the cycle would be reset, and they'd end up back in the prison. If you go onto YouTube and search the song for Mob of the Dead, which is called Where Are We Going by Kevin Sherwood, if you watch his lyric video, he works very close to Treyarch, so he would have had Treyarch's permission to do this. They probably would have worked together on these lyrics. But around 1 minute into the song, you will see this appear on screen. These aren't lyrics, obviously. These are jumbled up words that don't make sense. For us, Zombies players, especially now, we would see this and think straight away that this is a cipher. Remember though, during the time of 2013 when this was released, ciphers weren't a big thing in Zombies. However, the cipher that you can find in the Easter egg song was solved, and when you decode it, it says, "Let go and the beginning will become the end." Mob of the Dead was really the first map where we started to see signs that the zombie storyline was a part of the cycle. We saw major evidence of the cycle as a whole in Origins, but that map came later. Mob of the Dead was really the first map that we saw the cycle with our own eyes. So let go and the beginning will become the end. The beginning of the cycle is also the end of the cycle. That's where it finishes and starts over again. It's telling us to let go, and in order to break the cycle in Mob, we had to let the weasel get his revenge and kill the other 3 mobsters. If we didn't let go, then the cycle would keep repeating over and over again. You could also link this to Origins. That is also the beginning of the end. It is where our characters of Richtof and Taki and Nikolai and Dempsey meet up again hundreds of years after the Great War. It is also the end. I'm sure most of you watching this will already know about the 1962 Alcatraz Escape. This was the only time prisoners successfully escaped. Whether they died or went on to live is a different question, but they did manage to break out of the prison and leave the island, something which no one else ever managed. The 3 inmates that escaped were Frank Morris, John Anglin and his brother Clarence Anglin. There was also a 4th member who was Alan Clayton West, but he was unsuccessful. Not to go into it too much, but the way that these inmates escaped from their cells was by using spoons to dig through the wall. They would chip away at the vents, and then when the hole was big enough for them to fit through it, they escaped. In Mob, you can actually find a prison cell with a hole in the wall. Covering it up is a poster, and if you go into the afterlife, behind the wall, you can actually see on the floor is a spoon, a reference to the actual inmates of Alcatraz who escaped. They used paper mache heads that they placed in their beds to trick the guards, making them think they were still sleeping. They also created a handmade raft, and then on the 11th of June 1962, they escaped. Could our mobsters be loosely based on the Alcatraz escapees? Frank Morris, John and his brother Clarence Anglin. Mob of the Dead holds many interesting theories and secrets. We have plenty of maps based off real life locations, even if they're not, especially in the earlier days. Tryout based a lot of what we saw in Zombies off real life events, so there are tons of conspiracies. Anyway, there we go, that is it. That is all I have for you guys for today's video. As always, hopefully you have enjoyed. If you have, you know what to do. Drop a like rating if you want to. If not, it's totally fine. Thank you guys for watching anyway. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, goodbye.